and 100% of that fleet be converted to ZEVs by 2027. Plug-in hybrids would have a transition period, so these would be considered ZEVs until 2035. However, our CNG vehicles would not be considered CEVs, so we would have challenges meeting the intent of the Advanced Clean Fleet Rule. So we took a step back and looked at costs, vehicle costs only. As you may have guessed, the least expensive option are petroleum-fueled vehicles. But when we started to look at the combination of CNG, electrical plug-in hybrids, we really discovered that there's no significant difference in vehicle costs, especially as the market trends to vehicles that use alternative sources of fuel. The most expensive options would be to keep the CNG and move forward to other vehicle types. But as you can see from this table, that is the differences are not too significantly. We do expect that the prices of electric vehicles will drop given the current trends. So we have a few options here, given the inflection point that we find ourselves with the vehicle backlog. We can continue to stay on the CNG path. So this would mean that we would continue to purchase CNG vehicles up to the 68 number of vehicles that was intended for the CNG facility. We do have an option of exploring beginning to transition to other vehicles for the rest of the fleet. And we would also try to address the loss of productivity that we're currently losing with staff having to drive to the treatment plant to fuel. This option would be inconsistent with the CARB regulations. We don't believe that this option would meet the council's goals for a green fleet. It would also require the continued investment in the CNG facility. So that's if we stay on the current path. Another option for you is beginning to migrate away from the CNG vehicles and our CNG plant to begin purchasing more ZEV vehicles. An option within that, option 2A, we're engineers, so apologies for the 2A and 2Bs. But a milder plan would be for us to transition away and for us to give ourselves 7 years so that we can complete the life of the facility. So we would keep this going, so meaning we would continue to spend the $100,000 a year that we are for O&M for the plant. We would also have to incur more costs since we have to replace some of the mechanical equipment. So that would be option 2. Option 2B would be to begin decommissioning the plant right now, meaning let's address the loss of productivity with the driving. Let's fuel the existing cars that we currently have elsewhere, recapture the O&M costs, and just begin purchasing other vehicles. So we wouldn't be purchasing any more CNG vehicles.
Mr. Mayor, could I ask you a question on that slide?
Yes, please.
The blue box under option 2 there, the last item, could be implemented with an energy recovery project at the wastewater treatment. What is that?
So thank you, Councilmember Bonilla. I can't see some of the segments of the slides, so I'm glad you brought that up. So the treatment plant produces biogas, and the biogas we clean, we compress, and we use for vehicles. So instead of using that biogas for vehicles, we could actually recover that and recover the heat, and we can also generate electricity. So instead of fueling vehicles, we could use that energy to offset the intensive nature of what it takes to run the plant. So we could offset some of our natural gas costs as well as electrical costs with an energy recovery project.
Question on that. Thank you for that response. That particular gas is a product of our anaerobic digester, and it's basically, I think it's a methane fuel, isn't it?
It is methane.
It's not a biogenic natural gas.
Well, it is natural because it is produced from our human waste.
Right.
It is biogas.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And thank you for bringing that up.
I just have one question before we go on.
If you go back to that slide, it says fuel CNG vehicles off-site and recapture O&M costs for investment into transition. What is the price of what getting fuel off-site? And do we have man hours that would be required for that?
Yes. So instead of using our maintenance workers, we would actually hire, for example, a per diem, so less costly, just to do the driving and fueling. And when we look at not maintaining the facility, not paying or paying the additional cost for a per diem versus versus having our staff actually drive, we actually see a net savings even with the cost of the fuel. So we would be paying for the CNG, we would be paying for the labor, but we wouldn't be paying for the maintenance associated with the contracts. So there is a net savings. Okay. So option one, continuing on the to invest in CNG vehicles. Obviously, this maximizes the investment that we did make a few years ago on building the CNG plant, and it would continue to offset the use of fossil fuels. However, the disadvantages here is that we would likely be required to continue to operate the plant through 2032. Just looking at over the next 10 years, there are recurring costs, close to $2 million just in maintaining.
No, this will do it for now.
Because I can bring in a little.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So we would be having recurring costs, and we don't believe that this option would help us actually meet the CARB regulations that are most likely to pass. And this would also require, since we have not found a third-party buyer, that we flare the excess biogas generated at the plant.
Mm-hmm.
So option 2A, transitioning over 7 years. This would be we would have the ability to have some consistency here in terms of working toward meeting CARB regulations. We believe that we could take advantage of the market trends, which are really leading to electric. The disadvantages associated with this is that we would still have to incur the maintenance cost over the 7 years. We're not fully utilizing the CNG, and then we would at the same time be looking at the planning and engineering required for charging infrastructure as we begin transitioning. So decommissioning the plant altogether, we can avoid the $100,000 a year that it takes for us to work with contractors so that they can maintain the facility. We would be on that track to meet the CARB regulations. We believe, like I said, that the market trend is really moving towards electric vehicles. If we do implement an energy capture project at the plant, we could look into getting credits for generating green electricity. The disadvantages with decommissioning the plant, though, is that we would not be maximizing the full potential of the CNG facility, and that investment would be lost. We would also be required to plan and invest on the electrical charging infrastructure. So one of the things that we would like you to consider with these options is also, however, a potential bridge. We've done some research on other fuels. So there are vehicles that use diesel, and that is the biggest concern. However, we can begin using renewable diesel rather than fossil fuel-based diesel. And this would actually expand the use of renewable fuels, because there are vehicles such as our VACONs, our street sweepers, that there are no CNG options. So we could begin using a better fuel for those vehicles that we actually have no other options for. There is no difference in pricing between regular and renewable diesel. We don't have to change our fueling infrastructure, and it is readily available. So that is an option that we believe would give us a bridge as we move away from CNG, but we could tackle the fossil fuel use for the vehicles that we wouldn't be purchasing CNG, the CNG Type 4, and also vehicles where the market is just not there for CNG. So In the interim as well, we could evaluate our infrastructure needs for electrical charging, explore grant opportunities, maximize electrical vehicle purchases as possible. For example, the city of Fremont is exploring the use of Teslas for their police department. We could begin evaluating the project at the plant to actually generate some electricity and use the heat from that process. And we can begin staffing for per diem staff so that we can continue to fuel the existing vehicles that we do have. We had a very good meeting with PG&E a few weeks ago. They do have an electrical vehicle program where if you apply and commit to converting certain vehicles, there are incentives. They also will design and build the electrical infrastructure up to the meter. And so we would be working with them on assessing how many vehicles we would need to charge. There would be a 10-year commitment, but there would be a rebate for that as well. And just to give you a sense of our operational needs, electrical vehicle charging really depends on the miles traveled. With vehicles nowadays having the ability to travel 100 to 200 miles per charge, the charging, it would be rather manageable. So we would have the opportunity to explore this program with PG&E and actually get some rebates and get assurance that they can actually build that infrastructure for us to charge our vehicles up to the meter. So we are here tonight to ask for your feedback. In terms of meeting the priority of having or evaluating the feasibility of having a green fleet by 2030. We have the option one, staying on this path with the investment that we made on the CNG facility. We do see some challenges, not only on the regulatory front, but also on the ongoing expense front, the lead time that it takes to purchase CNG vehicles and the loss that we really see in productivity in terms of going to the treatment plant and in fueling. We would also still continue to flare the excess biogas that we generate. So under option two, transitioning away from CNG, we do have the ability to do this slowly, so take up to 7 years. We would still incur the O&M costs, but we could look at charging fueling elsewhere, which would help us regain some of that productivity loss that we're seeing now. But if we begin decommissioning the CNG plant now, we would basically see a net savings, and we could reinvest the money that we would be saving by not spending on O&M and the equipment replacement now, and actually putting that funding into opportunities for a greener fleet. And the bridge also to get us there with the concern based on the vehicles that there are either no CNG options, we can certainly start looking into contracts to purchase renewable diesel. So with that, we thank you. I'm sad that Matt could not be here, but Eric and I are here to answer any questions and to get your feedback so we can get on a better path.
Before we open it up to questions, I just wanted to see if staff had any kind of a preferred scenario or a recommended scenario. Did you have an opinion on if it was up to staff which way they would go, or is it just a toss-up?
It's not a toss-up. So our opinion, it would be to recommend option 2B. We believe that the CNG facility, maintaining that, it is intensive. It is costing us money. We have had operational issues. We're concerned about the skill set also in terms of making sure that it is up and running. I mean, we do have times when it is down because of equipment challenges. And so we think that the money can be spent by really beginning to transition to the use of better fuels and buying ZEV vehicles.
Okay, thanks. Councilmember Lee, I saw your hand up first.
Thank you, Azalea. I had a question about the electric option, and is your is your working assumption or assessment that if we were to move in the direction of electric, that there would be no compromise to productivity, that the on the market availability of this technology, the infrastructure investment could handle our current operations without additional lost, capacity, staff capacity, and as well as like the spatial considerations for the required, setup for the charging stations?
Sure. So if I can answer your first question first, in terms of loss of productivity, there are a lot of programs out there that help facilities manage their charging. So we can see when vehicles need to be charged, and really it's parking and plugging in. So we have the technology is there for us to really tackle the operational charging front. And then in terms of infrastructure, we did a in-depth assessment on the miles traveled per week. And so when you really look at that and the charging needs, we have to do a thorough assessment. But the charging infrastructure, it would not be as significant as you would think it would be, because there are vehicles that we just don't, they have very, very few miles on them. So we could definitely look at the technology, the softwares out there, and assess our operational needs to then size the infrastructure and the number of charging stations we would need.
Thank you. And then my other question is about the renewable diesel. How does that compare to standard diesel in terms of the emissions?
Well, it is made from agricultural products, so it is completely it's not fossil. So I don't have I can get you the actual carbon equivalents, but we would be using, it is agricultural based, so from fats rather than from fossil fuel.
And so, and that does meet the regulatory requirements for a ZEV?
No, so that would be the bridge, right? So there are vehicles that we just don't have electric options for at this moment, like our sweepers, our backhoes. But instead of using fossil-based diesel, we could be using renewable diesel. So we could see an improvement there in terms of the carbon being used.
But it doesn't actually. So you're saying that would be sort of an interim step, but ultimately would not be compliant with the regulatory requirements for ZEV?
So I don't believe that the CARB regulations can require ZEVs where that market doesn't exist.
Okay.
So for backhoes, for example, and I would have to, go back and really look at what vehicles they're looking at. But if there's no option for an electric backhoe, then then that would not count toward the intent of the CARB regulation, unless the market does go that way. And we know that the market certainly is there for trucks, but not necessarily for the heavy equipment such as sweepers and then the equipment that we use for construction.
Okay. And then my last question is, it seems to me, and tell me, it would be helpful to hear you confirm this. My understanding is that the investment has been lost. The investment in CNG has been lost, and any scenario forward would be a continuation of that loss.
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Bonilla.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A few questions. So the idea of the bridging fuel, the renewable diesel, where would our staff need to go to get that, to fill it up with that?
So at our corp yard, so we have our fueling station at the corp yard. And so instead of using regular diesel, we would just have a contract to purchase renewable diesel.
We have fuel tanks on site. You could use those. Okay.
Exactly.
The compressed natural gas, where would they go to purchase that if we decided to decommission our CNG?
So we have a few locations, one at the airport, and Eric can also chime in. So there are a few locations that we do go to when the CNG plant is down. And one being the
local,
airport.
they're not a long distance, or
Yeah, they're local. And
okay.
yeah.
The airport's about 5 or 6 miles away, so that's not that far. Regarding the flaring, I know that we've had flaring for years. And so if we decommission the plant, would we be then flaring this material indefinitely?
No, so that is the beauty of the treatment plant energy project, that we would take that biogas, instead of using it we've been using a fraction of it for CNG, but now we could use 100% of what we generate and focus on generating electricity and capturing the heat from that. So we would be using all the biogas generated at the plant.
That's a great use for that. Thank you. Regarding, could you go back to the slide where you showed that there's a potential for PG&E helping with charging, please? I didn't get a chance to look at all of that.
Great.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that the incentives up to $4,000 per vehicle, it is per site. So when we spoke to them, we would be evaluating the charging needs at the corporation yard, at the police station, the headquarters. We would be evaluating charging needs at City Hall. So we would have the ability to apply per site, which would be great, because then you're not locked into one site. It's really an assessment on per site and per meter. So they would upgrade the needs on their end, the upgrades on their end, to be able to supply the charging needs up to the meter, based on the number of vehicles that we would commit to convert to ZEVs. And we would have to make that commitment for 10 years for us to operate things on our side.
Yeah, I see that.
Charge.
A couple of things on that. Has there been any thought given to our fire trucks and that kind of equipment?
We have not reached out to fire.
Okay. Are we aware that Peninsula Clean Energy also does all the same things that PG&E is talking about doing here? They offer incentives for all of this?
Yes, we are. And we can work with you on learning more about those based on council's direction.
Okay, good. Thank you. And the renewable diesel, you said agricultural material, fats, oils, grease. That's stuff basically that when people years ago were using biodiesel, they were converting their cars. It's basically the same thing, right? The only difference is the processing. So it is not called biodiesel because it uses a different process to make the fuel. Okay, good. Thank you.
It's much better for the engine.
And that was Eric Bell, our fleet and facilities manager. It is the renewable diesel is better for the engine.
Much cleaner burning, I think. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Before we open up public comment, I just had one question. When we were going through the pluses and minuses, especially for me, I was particularly interested in 2A and 2B, and you were talking about kind of the ongoing cost and bringing it in the present value. Did you do any analysis that just got rid of all the sunk costs and just look at you said that it was a sunk cost and it was kind of a dying technology, with just what the comparison between the two costs would be between those two scenarios in terms of cost to the city?
We have not. We didn't go into a more robust financial analysis.
Okay.
But we can.
I would assume that that option 2A would be a lot more expensive than 2B, but that would just be my guess. All right, so I'm not seeing any other questions. I'm going to open up a public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have two hands raised. The first one is Adam Lorraine. Adam, can you unmute?
Test, council. Great. Hello. Good evening. Thank you, City Clerk, and good evening, council and staff. This is Adam Lorraine. I happen to be a Sustainability and Infrastructure Commissioner, but these are my opinions as a San Mateo resident only. I just wanted to comment in support of option 2 and likely option 2B if the council is interested in pursuing that. Per staff's recommendation. I will admit that I haven't personally researched this topic as much as any other potential topic to the point where I feel 100% confident in everything. But from the presentation today, and I think what we have experienced with the current program and what we see as trends in the future, of course, the future is electric. And I think, in order to meet the council's goal to get a clean fleet, it makes sense to maybe shift gears here and go toward an electric fleet with having biodiesel as a potential bridge fuel and the opportunity to still use the biogas for electricity seems to me to make this a very appealing and potentially exciting opportunity indeed. So I would thank Director Mitch for bringing this up. I want to thank the council for make a clean fleet by 2030 a priority. And it seems as if perhaps there's an opportunity here, given the work that's already been done by both council and staff toward this noble goal, to reassess and not be afraid of shifting gears in light of the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Carol Steinfeld.
Hi. First, I'll say I used to use processed biodiesel in my car long ago, and I think the car seemed to drive better than on regular diesel, and you didn't mind having the window open. But my question is, can the CNG facility simply be mothballed? More cities are using wastewater and carbon waste, like shredded cardboard, food and yard waste, waste organic oils, to create natural gas, and they're distributing it to, I'll say, the natural gas grid, including for use in stoves and heaters. Will this still be a possibility?
We'll be able to answer or address your questions after the public comment session is closed.
Mr. Mayor, I have no other speakers.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to close public comment, and I guess we'll first give staff a opportunity to address Ms. Steinfeld's question.
Yes, absolutely. To increase actually our biogas generation, one of the projects that we would be evaluating is looking at fats, oils, and grease, for example, to take in other organics to increase the generation of biogas. In terms of processing that gas and cleaning it so that we can inject it back into PG&E's natural gas distribution system, that is another option that we definitely can consider. We have been in touch with some consultants who do work with PG&E on that option. So we would have to see the pros and cons in terms of taking that gas and selling it to PG&E rather than generating electricity. So two energy recovery projects that we can definitely evaluate. But in terms of optimizing biogas, yes, we would be exploring things such as fog to increase the production.
Okay, so I'm going to bring it back to council we have about 13 minutes for final comments or direction to staff. We'd like to kick things off. Councilmember Pappan.
I mean, I think it's a strategic move, and to start the transition away, I'm inclined to go with 2B. I think it provides perhaps the best way to cut our losses and the most immediate way to cut our losses with respect to the drain that CNG is really putting on the city. I would like to see sort of that bridge explored about the use of renewable diesel, and exploring with PCE and or PG&E about what they can do for giving us direct supply of electricity as we move towards electric vehicles and the charging of the electric vehicles.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Bonilla.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I have one last question, actually. Looking at option 2 and looking at 2B, where we begin decommissioning the plant. No, option 2A, to transition away over the next 7 years and keep the plant operational until we own CNG vehicles are replaced. And didn't I understand we had about 48 CNG vehicles?
We currently have 20, so it would be continuing to operate the plant to fuel those 20 vehicles.
Okay, and of those, are they our heavier, more expensive vehicles, or which vehicles are they?
Yes, so all the CNG vehicles, we've got some bucket trucks, paint truck, trucks. So yes, we do have CNG heavy duty public works vehicles that we purchased 2 years ago that are CNG.
2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would end up taking whatever CNG vehicles we have over the term of the rest of their life and sending them someplace else to get their fuel. So
we would be driving. So that's an investment in the fleet that we made. And so we would continue to use those vehicles, but just go elsewhere to fuel.
Exactly.
Which would be less expensive than maintaining the CNG. Well, did I say that backwards? So
under 2B, we would do what you just said.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. You know what? After very careful consideration, I think I support option 2B, and for lots of good reasons. Thank you.
Councilmember Lee.
Yes, I also support option 2B. One thing that I love about San Mateo is that we are unafraid to make bold goals, and I think that this was a great idea given the idea to move in the direction of CNG, given the information that we had at the time, and the potential that it offered. But at this point, within where we are, where there's reduced capacity, productivity, increased cost, we're not on track to meet regulatory requirements, and there's been zero cost recovery, we have to change course. And so I definitely support option 2B.
Thank you. And I concur with my colleagues. I mean, we took the innovative path back then, but it was the wrong bet. And sometimes when you try to be on the forefront of things, you're going to make bad decisions. But I think it's really important when we do make a bad decision, especially that's bad in hindsight, we need to cut our losses and correct that. And for me, that's option 2B is the way to go. Don't have much more to add than that. Did you have additional comments, Deputy Mayor Bonilla?
I just want to say that I've been studying, since we're looking at the GPU later tonight, I've been studying potential for flood hazards over coming years due to sea level rise, excessive storms, different things. And I've noticed that it looks like in many of the scenarios that I look at over years, the wastewater treatment plant looks like it's underwater. Although I did get some information from Azalea last night indicating that the projections that I'm looking at right now don't include work that we have done on our own levees or that Foster City has done on its own. But being a carpenter and understanding that water always runs downhill and spreads from wherever it gains access, I also feel it's important that we look at both Belmont and Burlingame in terms of what work they have and haven't done. And in fact, I believe that's actually required under some state law for our land use considerations. But I just want to mention that our CNG plant there, the wastewater treatment plant, and everything else there could become obsolete in 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Thank you.
Okay. Director Mitch, do we have, did you get everything you needed from us? Any other clarifying questions?
We did. We thank you very much for the feedback and the direction.
Great, and thank you for that presentation. All right, we're gonna close this item and this meeting, and we're gonna re-adjourn to the regular meeting in about 7 minutes. So I'll see you everybody there.
And for the regular meeting, give us about 3 minutes to get it open.